Hey guys, this is going to be a quick, pretty much informal video just talking about the meta post Bologna and also how Victor kind of slots into meta. This won't be a specific like deck guide. This won't be about my deck. I know I keep talking about like, hey, I'll talk about my deck next week and so on and so forth. But on last Wednesday, I actually got my invite to Las Vegas, so I'll probably share my deck post Vegas. If you think it's kind of cringe that I'm gatekeeping my deck before the tournament, I wouldn't disagree, but I'm trying to get a deep run in there, so I'm gonna take every advantage I have. So yeah, especially with how diverse the Victor decks are gonna be. In this video, I'm just gonna talk about a few other very like popular deck lists that have popped up, including the best of Victor from Bologna. And also just if you want a deck or like build your own Victor list, I'm just gonna give you a few cards to consider and why they might be and how exactly it fits into the meta. So over here, this is the meta for day 2 for Bologna. And we have quite a pretty diverse list of legends that made it. The only legends that didn't make it are Garen, Ornn, and Leona, which is unfortunate. But honestly, I expected more legends to be dropped out by the end of day 1. We have a few Yasuos, like a Teemo, whatever. And and this is important to know because this is the decks that you want to be if you want to bring Victor to a large tournament and do well with it. And I think Victor does pretty well here. Draven, of course, is the most represented, and even though he didn't win or even or even get a top 4 finish, there will still be a lot of Draven players and that you need to be able to deal with. And honestly, the main reason why Draven didn't win is because everybody knew that the Draven was like the boogeyman that you have to beat, and everybody brings their own tech into Draven, and it's hard for Draven players to prepare for every other legend in the format, while every other legend format is very prepared to play against Draven. So, not discrediting all the other top finishers, but Draven is still a big threat that you need to know how to beat when you're designing your deck. And I currently am leaning towards a spell heavy Victor list, but because I think that does better into Draven. I think it's hard to be aggressive into Draven since we're usually just leaving a recruit on the field, which just means that Draven is going to get free draws for the entire game. And that could be really hard to deal with unless you get very good draws for the entire game. Besides that, so Draven, I think one of Draven's worst matchups, like pre Bologna, was Victor, spell heavy Victor, because we just have removal for all of everything that Victor wants to play, and we kind of deny Draven from any combats and denying them any draws. Post Bologna, it looks like Ezreal and all these other champs are also doing pretty well with Draven with their specific anti-Draven tech. So we'll see how the meta shifts, especially as we get to Las Vegas next weekend. Irelia, I think this matchup is very easy for Victor. Irelia's whole game plan usually depends on making sure that their Irelia or their Stellar Corn Herder never dies, but Victor just has an amplitude of different ways to just get rid of Irelia or the Stellar Corn Herder that it might be more difficult for them to really go through with their game plan. Combinations of like Singularities, Hidden Blades, Imperial Decrees, Call the Weeks, all of those could be really difficult for the Irelia player to get on. And we could start to apply the pressure while they kind of need to ramp so that they can play Irelia and have enough runes up to protect Irelia. Kai'Sa this set is much more control heavy. They're running a lot more removal spells and also a lot more card draw. I think that from my experience, the Kai'Sa matchup also does seem to be Victor favored. We both have a large pool of removal, and Kai'Sa's removal is pretty good at getting rid of all of our recruits, but the only difference is that we have an infinite source of units and Kai'Sa does not. The only time where this could get a little bit tricky is if Kai'Sa players start to run Assembly Rig as a counter to the Victor matchup. But if they don't have Assembly Rigs, or if we just have gear removal ready for the Assembly Rig, I think this matchup does favor Victor in the very long run. Ezreal was the winner of Bologna, if you didn't know. And I'm not exactly sure how Victor does into it, to be honest, because most of my games are from the local meta, and Ezreal, it would be a very difficult legend to play or at least the version of Ezreal that Alan ZQ won Bologna with. Rat Ezreal, I think, for similar reasons with Irelia, Rat Ezreal is completely easy for Victor to deal with. We have all of our removal that can get rid of their rat, and there's not much more that they can do after that point. But all of these purple decks that run Mind Splitter and keep recurring Mind Splitter, like Ezreal, Sivir, maybe Misfortune, they could be difficult for Victor to deal with if they keep cherry picking all of our important removal options out. Although, if your draw, depending on how your draw goes, your draw could just have enough removal that their removal doesn't really matter. And if you kill the Mind Splitter quickly enough, they typically wouldn't have the opportunity to like replay it with Arcane Shift or bring it back to hand and replay it or anything like that. Annie, similar to last set, I think it's kind of favored. Annie could be pretty aggressive, and they run a lot more units than they run like a decent bit of units. So Victor kind of has to be able to maintain all the removal to kill all those units. And once again, like Annie's purple, so you have to really be able to play around the rebuke, the fighter flights. Sivir, I kind of briefly talked about earlier, but Sivir also gets access to sabotage, so that really makes our removal options a lot more hard to have. So you really need pretty good card draw for like all these orange, purple, or just purple decks that keep recurring Mind Splitters. You gotta watch out for those. Most of the other lists I think are pretty solid for Victor. The other ones I would be scared of is Fiora. Fiora has access to Sabotage and Riposte, which could really make our game plan a little bit more difficult. So it's something to watch out for. I still think Victor's fine into it. And Rek'Sai, in addition to where is he? Azir, I feel like would be a little bit more difficult for Victor to be able to deal with because Azir is just able to go so wide and produce so many bodies that our removal isn't really efficient at killing all of these small bodies, like small base bodies. They get buffed up by their weapons. And Rek'Sai, kind of depending on your list, if Rek'Sai is like aggressive, then they have a lot of bodies that they're able to pump at, which might be difficult to keep up with. And if it's the control variant, like the spell slinging variant, then this Immortal Phoenix that we have to constantly remove over and over again could be really annoying as well. And I just thought of it, but I'm pretty sure even if we call the week Immortal Phoenix, they can use our call the week to play Immortal Phoenix again. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. In which case that would not be ideal for the Victor point of view. But I still think Victor's stance in the meta is perfectly fine. I think he's pretty good into most of the top decks. Although I am a little bit concerned about all of these purple decks with Mind Splitter and all of this hand rip that might be difficult to deal with. But here are a few different lists that I want to go over. This is the best of Victor list from the Bologna regional qualifier. And if I'm to be honest, I don't like this list too much because it has some aggressive components like art like 4 2 drops and then like Faithful Manufacturer Xinjiao. But it also has a lot of the control components like Singularity, Imperial Decree plus Bellows Breath, the Watcher, and a Time Warp. And so I kind of feel like it takes a little bit of both worlds, which isn't necessarily bad, but there's also just a few cards here that I'm kind of questioning. This Glass Mixologist is my main question because it's, if you don't know Glass Mixologist, it's a 5 energy, 1 power, 5 might unit that has Death Knell, which it allows you to play a unit with no more than 3 energy and 1 power from your trash, ignoring its cost. So it's like Spectral Matron on a Death Knell. I just feel like this card would be so awkward to get right. Are you like pushing it in and then cold weakening it to get a Xinjiao? Because your only good targets for this are Xinjiao, Faithful Manufacturer, and maybe a Pickpocket. But I'm not entirely sure. But they have like the Ballast Breath combo with Imperial Decree and Thousand Tail Watcher. I think this combo is a little bit too strong not to be including in your Victor lists, whether you are being aggressive or like more control. But besides that, I like the mainboard salvage and the pickpockets. Or I don't like the pick. I don't know if I like the mainboard pickpockets because there are some matchups where it doesn't. It's hard to find value with it. I'm happy to bring it in if my opponent either generates gold, plays seals, or if it's like a treasure hoard game. But I like to keep my pickpockets in the sideboard. Honest Broker and the Plunging Portal, I think are good 2-drops. I just don't know if Victor has a space for 2-drops. But overall, I like Reply Rex. I think Xinjiao is kind of a trap card for Victor. The 3 energy, 1 power, and 4 might is very good. And don't get me wrong, like Victor won't have trouble satisfying the requirement for Xinjiao to enter ready. But I'm just kind of in the boat where I think Sprite Mother is still better for specifically for Victor decklist. Because our playstyle is we just send in a unit to conquer after we hopefully like use removal or a little bit of combat tricks to get a battlefield. And we just do that every single time, letting that unit die if necessary. Whenever I push in a Xinjiao, it kind of feels bad if I push it in and I don't really have ways to protect it. So I would rather play a Sprite Mother, push in the Sprite, let it die, and then I still have a 3 unit in base that's ready to push into a battlefield next turn and probably like let die as well. So I am on board the Sprite Mother train over the Xinjiao. Yes, the Xinjiao is cheaper and the might that pushes immediately is bigger, but I think the value of Sprite Mother is a little bit better. For the battlefields, Raven Blue Conservatory, if you have a lot of spells, of course it's great. And your opponent, it'll be very difficult for your opponent to get value out of it because usually we're just slinging a spell to, or like an ability to kill the unit that is on Raven Blue Conservatory. So I think Raven Blue Conservatory is quite good. Treasure Hoard, I am a pretty big fan of just to generate gold because victor lists are getting more and more extremely power hungry. So gold is always welcome. And the Void Gate is also great for our Bellows Breath, our Wages of Pain, Singularity, Riptide Rex. It's able to enhance those spells, which is pretty important because there are a lot of 4-might units that are quite relevant, like Draven, Kaisa. Like you could say a rat with a cull if it's on that battlefield for any reason. Or even like a Stellarcorn Herder with a Guardian Angel. There's a lot of times where it's a 4-might unit pushing into a battlefield, and this allows Wages of Pain or a repeated Bellows Breath to be able to kill those units. There are also a lot of relevant 7-might units in the game, mostly Mind Splitter, but also like a Kaisa with a Spinning Axe, a Draven with a Spinning Axe, and those you need that extra 1 damage to kill using Riptide Rex or Singularity. So I do like Void Gate in this set too as a Victor battlefield. I'm a big fan of Card Sharp. With how expensive our lists are getting, I feel like Card Sharp is pretty important to have. The Treasure Hoard is also like helps a little bit. So I'm a big fan of Card Shop. It kind of helps pay everything. I would have more card shops. I don't like the Glass Mixologist. But besides that, I'm a big fan of this sideboard over here. The other Victor list I want to talk about was this list from Cody Williams. He was the Houston Victor Best of, and he won a win a case tournament with this list, apparently. And I like this list more than the best of lists from Houston. The main things that I would change is I don't think Rockfall Path is very good. I think this is supposed to be the first game battlefield. I kind of get the vision, but I feel like in the games that our opponent would just go to their own battlefield instead of Rockfall Path, and Rockfall Path wouldn't really find that much value throughout the game. So I'll probably change this. Obelisk of Power is going first here, I believe, because you could either just play a 3-drop or a 2-drop plus a recruit. And Void Gate is for the same reasons as the other list. It's just Void Gate is just very good. But this is much more control heavy. We have a lot more spells that are killing things. We have a lot of more of these top end units like the 3 Riptide Rexes. And we also have, I like to have Salvage in the main board because there are very few decks where Salvage wouldn't find value. Like Annie's or maybe Kaisa's if they don't have the Assembly Rig. Victor's if they don't have Vanguard Armory. But besides those, you could probably find some target, whether it be an Aurora, a Last Rites, a spinning axe, just regular gear. And worst case scenario, like you kill a gold token with it. It's like not the worst thing in the game. So I am actually mainboarding a few savages. But Pickpocket also very good. Imperial Decree pretty good. Machine Evangel could definitely be good into some matchups. I'm just not sure if those matchups would be like if I would be spending sideboard slots for those matchups. But besides that, this is a very standard list where you're kind of just playing a few units, not really participating in combat too often. It's against Draven at least. And then you're going to rely on most of your spells to be killing all of their units instead of like combat. For like the most of the game at least. So I want to go over cards that you can consider putting in your Victor decks. I'm just gonna go through what I think are notable ones, not through like everything. Just because I didn't mention it doesn't mean it's like unplayable in Victor, but I'm just gonna go through the most interesting choices for what you could be playing in your Victor list. First are the seals. I'm personally like never a fan of seals. I would only run yellow seals if I'm running like a beta hook deck, and I would only be playing blue seals if I have like an excessive amount of card draw, like a bunch of consult the past or premonitions. But otherwise, I think the potential of them being a dead draw later into the game and just kind of making your hand size smaller is just not worth running them. When you could just adjust your play style to better manage your runes in your game in the gameplay itself. Retreat, I think, is pretty viable for set 2. The ramp is really good at helping you get to high runes really quickly so they could really start pumping out all of these high influential spells. And it also can help you avoid combat because you can push in with a recruit and just retreat it. And even though it kills the recruit, you still manage to avoid a combat against Raven and also channel the rune exhausted. And of course, you could play this on other units to either save them from removal spells or just to be able to play them again, like a Faithful Manufacturer or a Sprite Mother, things like that. Orb of Regret and Stupefy, I think, are both pretty valuable for reasons similar to why Voidgate is being played more often, because it helps you hit those 5 mine or 4 mine or 7 mine units with your 3 damage or 6 damage abilities and spells. But Stupefy is like a goaded card. You're gonna run three Stupefies in almost every single blue list. But Orb of Regret, for similar reasons with the Seal of Unity, if you draw it early, it's fantastic. If you draw it in the late game, it's terrible. So I've actually tinkered around with it, but I actually don't run it. Bellows Breath is probably the most influential card that Victor has gotten in set 2. Comboing this with Imperial Decree to kill just 6 units, or comboing it with Thousand Tail Watcher to essentially deal 4 damage to 6 units is such a crazy powerful combo that I do think every Victor list should be running. Um, I like at the start of Spiritforged testing, I was like I sideboarded the combo, but the more I played, it was like it's too powerful to give up in your main board. So I think they're just must runs. Tempted Cask, similar to Orb of Regret and the Seals, it's fantastic if you get it early, but if you get it in the mid to late game, it could feel really bad. So I'm not a big fan of that. For 2 drops, let's talk about 2 drop units real quick. The Glory Seeker combo with Call to Glory is much less valuable in set 2 because purple, probably the strongest color in the game right now, is just invalidating so much combat that the extra might that we can get at reaction speed for free is much less influential. It could still save card units from like gear removal or spell removal, but I don't think it's really worth running. And it was just like specific tech into Kai'Sa in the first place, who's not as dominant, still a good deck, but not as dominant like Draven is right now. And B, it's just a pretty different playstyle from what it was in set 1. So the matchup goes very differently in set 2. Besides that, Daring Poro can get over 2 might units, so it could be good. Soaring Scouts, I think I would rather run Honest Broker over Soaring Scout, because once you spend the gold from Honest Broker, it's the same effect. And you get the extra power, or you get the extra might from the Honest Broker. So I prefer Honest Broker. Raven Bloom Student can be fine. Watch for Sentry can be fine. Depends on your playstyle. Plundering Poro is good, gives you gold, so that's a good unit. Honest Broker also gives you gold. Unsung Hero, you're probably not going to proc it unless you're running gear, but having to re-equip gear for Victor is just too expensive for the deck. Forecaster, I think, would honestly be not so bad of a card, but it's competing with a lot of other good 2 drops for the slot, so I don't really put it in my deck. Besides that, Call of the Week, super powerful card. You're running this in all of your Victor lists. Hidden Blade, you're also running 3 of this in all of your lists, probably. Salvage, you're definitely running 3 of these somewhere in your deck. It's going to be a combination from your main board and your sideboard. That ratio could be up to you. But there's very few matchups where salvage is completely irrelevant. Those matchups being like Annie, but they might still have like Longsword in there. Kaisa, but they might still be running assembly rigs, or like other Victor lists, but they might be running the Vanguard Armory. But besides like those lists, most decks are running some kind of gear, whether it be Aurora, Spinning Axis, Last Rites, like regular equipment, Guardian Angels, Zanyas, where you're most games, even a gear, even a seal, most games you're gonna find decent value from your salvages. So I have a few in my main board. Facebreaker is fine, honestly. I'm like kind of tempted to put some in my list again, but it could be super good, but it could also be kind of a dead draw. It depends on the situation, because there's so much removal going around that you shouldn't be hiding this most of the time. But being able to play at action speed is just fine too. So you could definitely run that in your lists. Premonition, it's playable if you have blue seals. If not, I don't really think so. It's so power hungry. Frigid Touch is pretty good. Um, we already have our 3 stupefies, but if you feel like you need more of them, you could use Frigid Touch to kind of help reduce units' might to the point where your removal can get rid of it. And it's especially good in combination with Blood Money. I don't think Blood Money is playable by itself, but in combination with Frigid Touch, it's quite good. Because with all the gear running around and like different ways to buff things, I think it's quite difficult to be able to find value with this without cards like Frigid Touch. Death Grip is also great. Sometimes it allows you to reuse might multiple times in a turn. I don't think Victor is the place for Death Grip though. Lecturing Yordle, I think, is a fantastic card in set 2. It was also a good card in set 1. But being this like control-ish deck means that we're trying to run our opponent out of resources. So being able to play a body and draw a card at the same time, I think, is really valuable in set 2. Let's see. I talked about how Call to Glory probably isn't great in set 2. Faithful Manufacturer, still a good card, gets you a lot of bodies, allows you to double conquer on turn 2, potentially. Is a very powerful effect. I think Noxing Drummer is just not worth it in this set. I wasn't even 100% of a fan of this card in set 1. It was just like the best 3-drop I could play. So I think she is outclassed by a lot of other 3-drops in set 2. Vanguard Captain has the same issue where the power cost really hurts because you don't want to be recycling power too early. Eager Apprentice could be okay, especially if you're running like a blue Victor list. Um, so something you could consider. I've been seeing a lot more of like Aries running this, but they also like there's a lot more green spells that you want to be casting on your opponent's turn as well. So it's probably a little bit less good in Victor than in other decks like Ari. Xinjiao, as I spoke earlier, it is a really good card. And if there is like if you do want to make an aggressive Victor list, you're probably gonna run 3 Xinjiaos and 3 Sprite Mothers. But otherwise, I personally favor Sprite Mothers because it allows you to push in with 3 energy, 3 might, and still have 3 might in your base for next turn. But it's still a perfectly fine card that you could definitely run with. I just feel like it's difficult for us to protect Xinjiao. But just if you just need that 1 extra power, 1 extra mind, or the 1 reduced energy to get over something, this could definitely be a good card. Card Sharp is one of my favorite cards for set 2. I just love generating gold. And if my opponent also wants the gold and I get 2 gold tokens from Card Sharp, and next turn I play Singularity without deramping, That is everything I ever wanted in a Victor list. I love when my opponent wants to gold. I think Victor is one of the decks that could use gold the best. And personally, I don't know if it's ever correct for my opponents to like want the gold as well. Like Renata players would want it, but Renata's not a great legend right now. I'm still trying to make her work, but that's been put on the side burner while I'm preparing for Las Vegas. But Card Sharp, one of my favorite cards for set two. Might be my favorite card for set two. I love Card Sharp. Wages of Pain is also another good card that we got in set two. Dealing blue, yellow was missing this like middle range of removal because we had like singularity. Um, we had singularity on the top side with Riptide Rex, and we had like Stupefy on the bottom side, but we didn't have this like mid-level damage spell. So Wages of Pain slots in perfectly at that range, dealing 3 damage, and also generates us a gold, which I love. So it's definitely better in some matches over others because every deck is trying to avoid combat. They might just skip this middle like 2 to 3 units range entirely, and they just start from like 4 unit where it could be a little bit tricky. But that's why Stupefy and the Void Gate is really important. But generating gold really good. It can also be hidden, fantastic. Pickpocket, as you might have seen if you were watching the finals for Bologna, Pickpocket has great value for being able to steal like seals and gold and some other one energy gear like coals for Rat Ezreal. But if you're watching the Ezreal mirror in the quarterfinals of Bologna, the number of pickpockets that were played and the number of steals that were getting destroyed was so funny. And watching that, I was like, "Yeah, pickpocket's a great card. I've like always liked this card since the start. Killing seals are just gold, but watching that did put a smile on my face. Killing all those seal of chaoses. Consult the Past is fine if you want card draw. Vengeance, it's an okay card, but the 2 energy is really expensive. So I'm not really sold on Vengeance. I know that the best of list had one, but also if you're gonna run Vengeance, why are you running one Vengeance? I'm not a big fan of the card. Spread Mothers, good if you want some ability to accelerate a unit. I think Blue Victor got a bit better this set because of like just the meta shifts and how we're a lot more controlling now. If you know about the no unit spell Victor, then they use this to just generate more recruits. Because the more and more spells you put into a deck, the less and less value Yellow Victor gets. So Blue Victor, especially if you have a few cheap units, could be valuable as well. But I'm not saying that Yellow Victor is not playable. Yellow Victor is still completely fine. The both of these lists run Yellow Victor. Kind of just depends on how your deck kind of rounds out. You really have to look at your list and be like, how many times is Yellow Victor going to be on the field when a unit dies? All these other cards, I think Cruel Patron is just not worth it as a card. Killing your own recruit just to get like a good statted unit that still dies to like singularities and other things like that. I don't think it's worth it. Renata would only be put in if you're running an aggressive Victor list, but I don't think Victor is trying to be aggressive this set in this current meta. I personally am not a fan of the Jace combo with the 7 energy gear that is eluding me currently, but it's just inconsistent. If you draw it, you just potentially win the game, assuming that the gear doesn't just get destroyed instantly. But other times, if you don't draw it, you just either have this clunky Vanguard Armory that you might not have time to play, or you have this 4 might 4 might unit that doesn't do anything. So I think it's really awkward. I'm not a big fan of it. I like to play decks that are consistent and reliable instead of these like high rolly decks. Azir could also be good once again, but I think that's more for an aggressive deck or like a more token spam deck. Remember, like I play Victor as control, where we just summon the minimum number of recruits that we need. Rocket Barrage, I was initially a hater of this card because paying 4 energy, 1 power to deal 4 damage sucks. Like it's just bad, and like it's just not a great rates. And paying 4 energy, 4 energy a power to kill a gear is even worse, since it's 2 energy more expensive than a salvage, and you don't get to draw one. But the deal 4 is pretty relevant. Like I said, there's a lot of relevant 4 might units: Kaisas, Dravens, um, like pit crews, Stellarcorn herders, with that this can snipe, especially or like Lucians, especially since they're trying to go into a battlefield and then come back. This can snipe them in the base. So this is definitely a card you could consider. Drop order would require to have gear, so unless you're always gonna have like a lot of gold, it's not consistent. Fallen Comet, I like as 5 energy with no power to deal 6. It's gonna kill most things, but that those times where it doesn't kill the units kind of hurts a lot. And so I do think that I would rather run Drag Under instead of the Fallen Comet. It's gonna depend on your local meta and how many units are really greater than 6 might. But if they aren't that many that are greater than 6 might, then Fallen Comet would be a fantastic card for you to run. The other problem though is that this is blocked by Unyielding Spirit. So in that case, the Drag Under would also be better as well. Machine Evangel was mostly good in set 1 against the Kaisa matchups. It didn't even feel that great to play against all the other matchups. So since Kaisa is playing a little bit differently this set, I don't think Machine Evangel is very good. Definitely could be a sideboard into some matchups as well. Echo, I think, is still waiting for his time to shine. I don't think it's happening yet. Or is it? You could definitely you could definitely cook a list with Echo. I'm like reconsidering right now. But you could maybe cook a list with Echo. But we'll see, we'll see, we'll see. Imperial Decree, you just have to run it in combination with Battle's Breath. It's just such a disgustingly powerful ability to kill 6 units like anywhere, like 3 and 3 of course, but it could target battlefield and base. Such a powerful ability. Another valuable thing to mention is that one of the hardest things to remove in the current game is Ferris Forerunner. And if Ferris Forerunner is at a battlefield, you can Imperial Decree, just walk a recruit into it to kill the Ferris Forerunner, and then Bellows Breath the backline to cleanly remove it. So that is one play that you should always be looking out for when playing against red decks. Drag Under, having a kill spell at action speed is pretty valuable. At first, I was also like a hater of this card as well. But once again, let's say a Ferris Forerunner is trying to push into a battlefield. But if you were able to play Drag Under, then you first prevented the Conquer, and the 2 3 might mechs are now in the base not readied, and you could probably spend your next turn trying to find ways to kill those off as well. So I think this is very valuable in that time as well. It's also great to hold for any accelerate units your opponent might have, like Kaisas or Darius's, so that you could kill them and prevent your opponent from conquering. Riptide Rex is pretty good at just being able to get things off of battlefields. 6 might 2 power for 6 energy 2 power for 6 might, and usually killing a unit, dealing 6 to a unit, is pretty good if it works. The problem with Riptide Rex is if there is a hidden fight or flight or a flash, then they could run away from the battlefield, fizzling the ability. Or if they play Unyielding Spirit, then Riptide Rex also wouldn't work as well. Also, Not So Fast would also cancel Riptide Rex's abilities. So there's definitely more things that you have to play around when you're playing Riptide Rex this set. Kaisa has been running progress days, but honestly, I haven't really been having the need to get this. I haven't had the need for this explosive of card draw. I would rather run Consult the Past over Progress Day, in my personal opinion. King's Edict. Now, if you haven't really put that much thought into it, you might be like, why am I considering this obviously multiplayer based card? But with the introduction of a not so fast, killing certain green units could be very difficult. Because if I try to if I try to call the weak, it gets defied. If I try to hidden blade, it gets not so fasted or defied. If I try to drag under it, it still gets not so fasted. But this card cannot be cancelled. It cannot be like counterspelled besides wind wall and technically Mystic Reversal, but nobody plays that card. And obviously like the Riposte if you're playing Fiora. But against green decks, like Irelia and Ornn, this deck could be a backbreaker that just gives your opponent no way to like deal with this if they don't have Windwall. So if there's a lot of Irelia players or Ornn players in your local meta, put these in your sideboard. They will absolutely destroy Irelia. Besides that, Grand Stratagem, we're not token spamming, so it's not very valuable. You could probably cook up a pretty cool list with Kaisa, blue Kaisa, but I haven't tested around with it. Singularity, goated card. It's so good at removing like the threats that Draven is trying to present. It's pretty good into like all these miracle lists that are just pumping out units like Miracle Draven, where you could just kill two of them pretty cleanly. Hopefully you have a Bellows Breath and Imperial Decree for the rest. Thousand Tail Watcher. Remember, if you combo this with Bellows Breath, you could deal 4 damage to like 6 units. Or if you repeat the Bellows Breath, you could deal 5 damage to up to 6 units. Oh, no. So sorry. You could deal 4 damage to up to 6 units or 5 damage to 3 units, whichever one is more convenient at the timing. So something to watch out for. Unchecked Power could be good, especially against some Miracle lists like Miracle Draven. It could kill off a whole lot of units, but having it exhaust all of your friendly units is pretty bad, so it's kind of hard to make work. Vanguard Armory, I already mentioned that I wasn't a big problem of it. Harness Dragon. Here's the thing with Harness Dragon. It's still just not so fasted, like the ability. But besides that, there's really no way to stop it. This bypasses um, other counterspells besides not so fast. It bypasses Unyielding Spirit. It bypasses Fight or Flight, like Hidden Fight or Flight or Flash. But the problem is, it's comparable to Riptide Rex. Am I going to pay 2 extra energy for those guarantees? Once again, it's going to be like you have to get to 8 energy to play this, which could be doable, like which is doable, but could be difficult depending on how the stage of the game is going. Honestly, Time Warp, I don't think like Time Warp in Victor is a gimmick. Your opponent doesn't expect it, which allows you to potentially get good value out of it. But if your opponent is like playing around it, either they can play around it and then it's a bad card, or they're in a position where they can't play around it, in which case typically you would have won the game anyways. So I don't think Time Warp is like a good card in Victor as a whole, but to catch your opponents off guard, that could be valuable. I'm not gonna shut that down. The best of Victor list did have one that it probably caught a lot of opponents off guard. So I wouldn't really dock it off, but overall, probably not the most optimal thing to be running. I think a third Singularity would probably be the most consistent thing to be running for this deck. But yeah, those are all the cards to consider putting in your Victor list, I think. I hope I didn't miss any. But some of the general trends are that combat is becoming less and less relevant because of Purple's dominance and Fight or Flight Rebuke being in the meta, where we're gonna be focusing on removal, like spell-based removal or ability-based removal, and just kind of conquering with our recruits and letting them die or whatever whenever we need to. But that part's not too different from set one. I've been locking in for Vegas. I've been doing a lot of play testing with my testing community, I guess. I hope I do well in Vegas. My first goal is top 64 because I want to qualify for the actual regionals. After that, I am shooting for best of Victor, of course. And after that, just get as deep of a run as possible. I'll probably be updating as I go along at the tournament on my X or Twitter. So follow me there. I believe my YouTube has a link to it. If you want to keep up with how I'm doing in the tournament. But wish me luck. I will for real this time. Next, the Wednesday after Las Vegas, I will have a Victor for my deck list up. Hopefully, I did well and I could actually like show that it's a good list with results. But even otherwise, I'll just show off my deck and maybe talk about what was lacking about it if I didn't do so well at Las Vegas. But that's what I want to talk about today. Thanks for watching. Wish me luck. Bye bye.